Good afternoon, it's Tony Williams here from Cardiff Council. I'm Contract Officer in Social Services. Just a quick recap, we're putting on what we're calling a webinar today, just to give some reassurance to all the care staff who are doing a fantastic job over there at the moment in the communities. This is set up for domiciliary care, residential, nursing, anybody providing care out in the community. And we've got colleagues here from University Hospital Wales, Owen and Yvonne, who will be talking to you shortly. Giving a bit of practical advice of PPE, which bits to use, how to apply it, and major sort of ABCs of do's and don'ts on PPE practices with COVID in mind. So there's obviously been recent guidance sent out by the council in the last week, so we'll be touching on that today, what that means to you in terms of delivering care. And just to really, for a bit of housekeeping, that this footage will be available, the video piece will be available for next week, 7 days, for use as a training tool and cascading to your staff. And we're hoping then that this will be put on YouTube later on. We're looking to share this across the country then as well. So Q&A session will be following shortly. We'll take any questions you've got. And just really thanks everybody for the fantastic job you continue to do. And whatever we can do to help you in terms of training support or guidance, we're here to help, and contact us in the contracts team, ASCSDT. But without further ado, I'll hand over to Owen and Yvonne from University Hospital Wales. Welcome back, guys, and thanks ever so much.
No problem. Afternoon, everyone. So I'm Owen Sutton. I'm one of the consultants in infectious diseases and microbiology based up at the University Hospital Wales.
And I'm Yvonne Hyde, Senior Nurse for Infection Prevention and Control for Catherine Bay University in Oxford.
And so what we've been asked to do as well as a Q&A is just a recap of what we went through last time on the last webinar about donning and doffing PPE. So we're going to start with that. We've brought some examples down with us, and I'm going to be the model for the PPE, and everyone's going to talk us through the donning and doffing procedures. So should we start with that?
Yep. So we shall start with the mask. Okay, so we'll start with the basic PPE that's required. So the most important part of the body that we're protecting is the face. But we'll just put on your normal baseline PPE, your mask first. Now this mask is a tie mask. Probably a lot of you won't have that. We've just brought this for demonstration purposes for today. We know that many of you would have been supplied with a tiger mask, which has ear loops. Not everybody has the same shape or size, so we just recommend, if it is a little bit loose, to double loop the loops around your ears for a better fit of that mask. So this one's a tie mask. We've also got a visor. This is a full face visor. Now some staff will have been given goggles to wear, and there's just different types of eye protection out there. So today we brought the visor with us. And then plastic apron, and there are various colours out there, various lengths of apron. I don't think that really matters, so long as you've got a plastic apron which is covering the main parts of your body. That could be, if a patient is coughing, protect the main parts of your uniform underneath. And then gloves, so disposable gloves to be worn at all times. So the main advice with PPE is when there is a risk of coming into contact with blood or body fluids, personal protective equipment appropriate to that setting or risk should be worn. So we know that COVID-19 is spread via the respiratory risk, which is why we're wearing the facial protection in particular, and protecting the fronts of our clothes with the aprons. And gloves, obviously, hand hygiene is really, really important for every episode of care that we give. So we're protecting our hands, and gloves will be worn at all times.
So this is the PPE for patient contact within 2 meters, where you're at risk of droplet spread of the disease. So patients spreading disease by coughing or by very close personal contact. Not for aerosol generating procedures, which we'll come on to in a second. And the other thing to mention is obviously that the order of putting on the PPE is less important because you don't have any contact with the patient or the infection at that point. The crucial thing is the order in which you take it off and try not to contaminate yourself.
Right, so do you want to remove this?
Yep.
PPE?
Want to talk us through the
So we shall first of all take off the gloves, and there is a sequence for taking off gloves. So you take the outside of the one glove with the opposite hand, turn it inside out on itself and remove that. And then with the ungloved hand, you then put that inside the second glove, pull it out, bring it out inside out on itself and remove them. Now it's very important that hands are decontaminated, so it depends on what you're by, so either hand washing or using an alcohol-based hand rub. We'll take off the apron, so you want to do this really without wafting the apron around the place, so you want to do it gently, taking it from the inside, folding it up and putting it into the waste bin just by you. Again, you can alcohol gel your hands or wash them before you go to remove your eye protection. Now, in general, if you're in a bay with patients that are affected, you will take off the apron and gloves while you're in the bay, and then the facial protection after removing your hands. You leave the bay and you'll come and remove the facial protection then.
Do you want to touch on sessional use versus similar use?
Yeah, so the new guidance has, instead of every episode of care having to change the PPE, the new guidance has mentioned sessional or shift use of the PPE. So if you're in a room in a care home and you have several residents or patients in there, the PPE above the face can be put on whilst providing the care to the patients in that room, but the gloves and aprons must be changed between patients and hands must be decontaminated each time you remove the gloves and aprons. So the sessional use is much better. It makes it easier for you to work, to work continuously rather than having to leave the room, change the PPE and go back in. So long as the upper part of your, as long as your face is, you can leave the mask and apron on, mask and visor, sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied. You can leave that on in the room, and then when you leave that bay, you finish providing the care, you'll remove the gloves and apron as normal, and then take off the mask and visor outside the room.
Okay, so talk through removing the visor.
Yeah, so the visor, you want to remember it is possibly being contaminated if you've had patients coughing or whatever, so you'll take that off again gently, over your head and away from your face. You can put that down in an area if we're going to where it's safe to put that down, because we will look at decontaminating that after use. And then it's how you remove the mask really is probably the most important. So you've taken off the visor, you will wash your hands or alcohol gel them, and then you will remove the mask. So with the tie mask, you will undo the ties slowly and gently. If you've got a mask with the loops, you remove one loop from one ear and you will take that away from your face without wafting it in the ear, and you will put it in the receptacle immediately, and then you will wash or alcohol gel your hands again when you do that.
Yeah, I guess this is the key point to make, is that PPE is obviously very useful, but it's only as part of a complete package really of care interventions, and it's not the be all and end all in terms of protecting yourself from transmission from the virus, and it's very easy to get a false sense of security by wearing PPE and feel that your protection is total, but actually you have to still be vigilant, and the point at which people are most likely to contaminate themselves is when they begin to relax as they're taking off the PPE. They're no longer in direct patient contact, but that's a really risky point where you can quite easily contaminate your hands and then transmit the virus. So just be mindful of that.
And we know that some people are not used to wearing masks, so when they take them off, the face feels quite itchy where it's been, and you have a tendency maybe to go and rub it. Definitely don't rub your face until after you've washed your hands. It's really important. And try and avoid putting your hands to your face at all if possible.
Yeah. I think what we said last time, which might just be helpful just to run through again, is that there are really three ways you're going to catch the coronavirus, and so just to bear those in mind in terms of the situation that you're in, and that informs what measures you should take to protect yourself. So the first one is contact. So any surface could have coronavirus on it. It doesn't really matter where you are. If you're in any environment of the service, you could have coronavirus living on it. So the main method of catching it in that circumstance is touching a surface and then touching your face and contaminating your mouth or your mucous membranes. And the only real way you're going to prevent that is by really stringent hand hygiene, by remember not to touch your face. So no amount of PPE will prevent that form of transmission. The only way you're going to prevent it is by really good hand hygiene. Then the second way you're going to catch it is from droplet transmission. So that's within close contact of someone who's got the virus and is generating droplets. And obviously you generate more droplets by coughing, but we know that droplets can be generated fairly easily, and that's why we're asking you to wear PPE for any sort of close personal contact. And the fluid repellent face mask there provides adequate protection, so you're no better protected by wearing any of the more complicated masks or the complicated respirators that you see people wearing than you are just by a simple surgical face mask. And the main thing is actually to remember when you're taking it off to try not to contaminate yourself. And then the final route of transmission, which is actually very rare and contributes very little to transmission of the virus in the real world, is aerosol, which is generated by certain procedures. Specifically things like positive pressure ventilation or CPR, and that generates smaller droplets that will pass through the surgical face masks, and you require a more a more close-fitting mask like the FFP3s, and more precautions because the aerosol are smaller, hang in the air a little bit longer, and therefore you require a slightly more protection. But actually, the list of aerosol generating procedures is very low, and in the community we expect the vast majority of people not to come into contact with any aerosol generating procedures. In fact, even in hospital where we're working with patients with the coronavirus, I haven't had to use any aerosol based precautions in the last month, so it's not a major route of transmission.
No, we've only got a couple of designated areas like critical care and one respiratory medicine ward and the theatres where we wear these the closer fitting masks more often.
Final thing to say is that maybe PPE is a good thing if you're looking out for each other. So obviously if you're working in pairs, make sure that you're looking out for each other in terms of putting the PPE on and not being afraid to point out when people have got things slightly wrong or they're doing things in a way that could contaminate themselves. I think we all have to be quite open to accepting comments from other people about whether we're wearing the wrong things in the wrong areas, because ultimately we should all be looking out for each other, and certainly that's the attitude we take in the hospital setting, is that anyone from the cleaner to the consultant can point out when someone else is using PPE incorrectly, so that we make sure we're getting it right.
Do you want to have the gown and the
mask?
So the PPE recommendations for aerosol generating procedures require a long sleeve fluid repellent gown, which Owen has got on now, and they can make you very warm. So really, if you are going to take care for a patient who's having an aerosol generating procedure, you need to plan before you do, that you have all your equipment ready, and that you're ready to go and undertake that task when you're putting on the PPE, because what you don't want to do is put it on, then have to leave the room and go and get more PPE again. Get the gloves on. So this mask is it's an FFP3 standard mask. This is the one that has been provided through the pandemic stock. It's a 3M 8833 valved mask, and the valved is just because of this bit here, which can make it more comfortable to wear actually, because they are very tight fitting. You can get very warm, which is another reason why I'm saying plan the work that you're going to do before you put it on, so that you don't have to leave it on for longer than necessary. Now, to wear an FFP3 standard mask, it is a health and safety requirement that you have a formal fit test for it, because not all masks fit everybody, so different brands will fit different people. This is the one, as I say, in the pandemic stock. It's got a rubber seal on the inside to help get a better fit. The fit test itself, if you're deemed suitable to wear one of these, that your role requires you to it, the fit test will take about 20 minutes in total, and you can't eat or drink for 40 minutes. So eating, drinking, smoking, etc. for about
Hi everybody, just to come in there briefly, in terms of the respirator masks and the where those are needed, just to let you be aware that if there is a situation where you've got a service user presenting with the enhanced needs, if you liaise with our colleagues in the health board, we've got nurse assessor teams who will be able to come and support you with fit testing. They will also be issuing supply then of the respirator masks. Then subsequently we will pick that up in terms of social services for ongoing delivery. We can confirm that in the morning, but that's the anticipated be the process. So if you do have cases, again, liaise with the health board in the first instance, and then we'll pick up with that through social services in due course. Okay.
As Owen said, there aren't that many people outside of the hospital that have aerosol generating procedures. So again, when you're wearing the mask, you would wear a full face visor so that all of you is protected. And I suppose depending on your duties, sometimes we would ask or require to wear an apron over this as well, although these gowns are fluid repellent, so should suffice in most cases. So again, then to take off, this is where it's really important that you get the doffing procedure correct. So again, in the room, before you exit, you will take off your gloves first, and you'll use the same method for removing your gloves. So use the outside, pull it inside out on itself, and then with the free hand, put it inside the glove, bring it out again inside out, and put it in the waste bin. So the gown will come off next. So this is where your body system is really important, because you might actually need a bit of a hand to get the tie undone.
I'm going to cheat because I want to use the gown.
He's going to cheat because he wants to reuse it, but this is where the body would help you to undo the ties at the back. So you would take this off, sort of bring it in, bring the front in on itself, and once you have it off, you put it in the waste bin, and it's important that you wash your hands when you've removed that. So then when you come out of the room, again, like last time, the visor would come off first, safely, so that you're not contaminating your eyes. You put that aside or in the bin, whichever. And the mask, how you take this mask off is really important, because we've been in an area with an aerosol, so probably more of the mask will be contaminated with finer aerosols. So you need to make sure that with a mask like this, you would have to go to the back, grab your two ties, and take it off without flicking the mask, which can be difficult, but this is where your fit test will help you. And you put that in the bin, and then this is really important that you would wash your hands, soap and water, or use an alcohol-based hand rub for them. And then you can breathe, because you will find it's a lot cooler once you take the mask off.
Yeah, so just 2 points to make there. The first thing is that although that PPE looks much more impressive in terms of the protection it's providing you, it's much more uncomfortable to wear, and it's much more difficult to take off without contaminating yourself. So there are risks associated with wearing it, and it's also quite uncomfortable. So that's the reason why we don't want to recommend it for routine use, even though it looks as if it's providing you much more protection against the viruses. It's not actually providing you any more protection in the majority of cases without aerosol generating procedures. And it's actually much more risky in and of itself, in that the doffing is more complicated and working in it is much more restrictive. So just bear that in mind, and that's the reason why it's reserved for those aerosol generating procedures. And the last point I want to make, which we also made in the last webinar, is that with PPE there's obviously quite a lot of anxiety among all staff groups in dealing with this, because it's a new virus and everyone wants to protect themselves. And you can sort of drown a little bit in what ifs. So what if I get the virus on my shoes, or what if I get the virus on a bit of me that's not covered, or my hair's not covered, or the neck, etc., etc. And you can really sort of start to go down those rabbit warrens. But actually, if you just think about the way you're actually going to get it, is largely if you get it on your hands and touch your face, or if you breathe it in. So rather than drowning in those sort of 1% or less scenarios where it's on it's on your shoe or it's on somewhere else, if you just concentrate on your hand washing, not contaminating yourself when you're doffing, and you're wearing the right kind of PPE for the right situation, you will have a good protection, and you will have significantly reduced your risk.
That was mostly it on the PPE.
Largely what we covered last time.
Yeah. Okay. I think just at this point it may be useful if we if we could just touch on the new guidance has just gone out about sessional usage of PPE, obviously principally with care homes. There's been a change in the guidance with regards to domiciliary care, so much more provision in terms of PPE in a domiciliary setting. But if we could just clarify what the expectation is for care providers in terms of sessional practice, okay?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, the sessional practice, whether you're wearing the tight and fitted mask or the fluid repellent surgical mask and the visor, the guidance is the same. So we can stay on for a session while you're in a room caring for multiple patients, or when you're in that room, you can leave what's above the head on and then remove your gloves and apron and decontaminate your hands between patients. Once you've finished in that setting, you need to remove all the PPE and wash your hands, as we mentioned earlier. So I think this is why you've got to plan your workload really for when you're going into that environment, that you have any equipment that you need going in there, rather than having to come in, come in the room and go back out multiple times. Just try and forward plan a little bit if possible.
I guess the key thing in the guidance is that the PPE has to change if the type of patient you're caring for changes. So if you're moving between patients with disease to patients without, then you change your PPE. So again, like Yvonne said, if you're staying within a setting where all of the patients have symptomatic COVID or proven COVID of our throats, well, then the PPE use is sessional, and that makes it really important that you try and plan as much as you can so you're not moving from sort of clean to dirty areas and back again.
Okay. Just at this point, we're hoping that these are going to be some ongoing webinars as we go through the next maybe sort of fortnightly, some of that aspect if we can, technical issues allowing. Basically at this point we're going to be offering up a 10-minute slot for our colleagues in Vale of Glamorgan Council. I've been in touch with them today. There aren't any key themes or key questions they'd like to be answered by our specialists here today. So we'll probably move on straight on ahead into the Q&A session now. So anything and everything, we're all here to help and just fire questions over. Okay, questions coming in relation to cleaning and cleansing of reusable goggles and masks, visors. Obviously I'll pass to Yvonne now, but just to say we've got an officer here from the Council Environmental Health Department, so she'll be taking a few questions, doing a quick presentation in about a quarter of an hour or so. So if there's any questions in and around sort of hygiene, infection control within premises, Sarah's here to help out very shortly, but I'll hand over that one for Yvonne for now.
So the solution that we recommend for cleaning off the goggles is a chlorine-based solution, a sodium hypochlorite. There's different brands on the market, Actichlor Plus or Chlorclean or Titan. We would recommend that as a dilution of 1,000 parts per million. So it would be the normal dilution that you would make up when using a chlorine product.
Okay, so the next one, question about sessional.
Can we clarify sessional use in domiciliary care? If a double-handed team are in a car together, are they putting on a new mask to travel together based on the 2-metre rule and on to the next client, etc.?
Well, I mean, we don't recommend masks in the cars,
Yeah.
but I would recommend a new PPE for each house you would go into, for each home you go into. Yeah.
As I said, refer to the guidance that was sent out from Council last week. Any questions that's not covered off in the policy, again, ASCSDT will come back to you probably with a response. Yeah, if we could just clarify that with Yvonne now in terms of the aprons compared to gowns, where or when they've been differently used.
Yes, so the apron is for your usual care that you're providing to a patient or a resident. The long sleeve fluid repellent gown is only required when there is an aerosol generating procedure. So if the patient is on NIPI or CPAP or has a tracheostomy which requires suctioning, then the long sleeve fluid repellent gown is to be worn then. I believe the guidance came out yesterday that the overalls can be worn instead of a gown. But we haven't started that or started working on that guidance yet within the health board. So
I can just respond in terms of stock. Obviously, we're currently sort of procuring on the basis of the aprons within the guidance that was there previously. As I said, if there are issues with aerosol practices, AGPs, please identify them to us. If you don't have appropriate kit in situation at the moment, we'll liaise with our colleagues in the health board to make sure you're appropriately risk assessed, tested and fitted in with the right equipment. So just let us know through ASCTT if that is the case and you're not fully prepared at the moment.
The next question is, in general, personal care and domiciliary care, is it a good idea to wear goggles and masks? I think the guidance also covers a lot of anxiety with patients, so they can be worn. With the masks or visors, we've tended to go along the lines of a risk assessment. So if the patient is coughing, spluttering, wheezing or sneezing, then I would definitely say yes to wear eye protection.
Yeah. In terms of the Cardiff guidance that went out last week, I think we've taken a pragmatic step in terms of Cardiff authority that we're expecting the full PPE with masks and visors to be in situ for all domiciliary calls. We're scoping up in terms of overall demand across the sector over the next couple of months on that basis. So the expectation as of now, or as of last week, that all domiciliary calls, it's full enhanced PPE with visors and masks.
Yeah, because the thing with a cough is it can happen at any time and they're usually spontaneous, so you will be covered up for everything then if you wear it.
Question, but we understand that in supported living should be table 4 for people who are not non-symptomatic. Therefore, staff should be wearing disposable gloves and aprons, and for any care support involving physical contact with someone supported. However, face masks and goggles will only be used where risk assessment dictates that this is required. Can you confirm this is correct?
I think in general, if domiciliary care is being provided, whatever the setting, we would now recommend masks and eye protection are worn. And this really has been brought in to try and address the anxiety of a lot of care providers. So, you know, normally we would say where there's a risk, if somebody's coughing, spluttering, wheezing or sneezing, then you would wear the facial protection. Other than that, it's not required. We understand that we're in a different situation and a different world now where we're providing care. So I think on the whole, people are, and I'm quite comfortable with them wearing the protection.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think also that there's been a change in stance or confirmation from the health board this week that there's a switch to the table 4 in terms of provision and sort of risk assessment, so that has happened actively. That's the line of travel with most care settings now. So I think if you've got a specific question related to supported living, just put it through to the ASCTT box and we'll come back to you directly.
In general, if you're doing close patient contacts now, yeah, as we've said, everyone is now wearing PPE, full PPE for all of those. 3M mask, is that single use only?
Yes, so all disposable masks are single use only. So I suppose that's something to say. We know that there are lots of people who are, you can see walking around in the supermarkets or in any setting they use, wearing a mask under their chin. Once you take the mask down from covering your mouth and your nose, it needs to be taken off completely and put in the bin. So you cannot re-wear or wear again a disposable mask. Disposable and single use must go in the bin.
Is there a best method of visor cleaning for domiciliary workers, spray versus dip with a chlorine-based solution?
We would suggest that you pour the chlorine solution onto a cloth and wipe the visor over with that. We're not really a lover of sprays in any healthcare setting. Not really sure about the dips, so if you have a bottle with the solution made up, pour it onto a disposable cloth and wipe the visor over with that.
Gowns for use for someone who uses BiPAP as well. So BiPAP will class as an aerosol generating procedure, so you should be wearing the enhanced PPE, but it does depend a little bit on whether they're obviously using it at the time. I guess because if someone's using their NIV machine at the time, then definitely you need to be taking aerosol-based precautions. If someone uses it intermittently, but it's not on at the point where you're going to supply care, then I think as long as sufficient time has passed afterwards, you can step down your AGP precautions. So it's a minimum of 20 minutes, but ideally an hour after they've used the machine. You can go back to the non-AGP based transmission precautions.
I'll pick up the next one. So it's a question there. Domiciliary setting, agencies providing staff with masks, aprons, gloves, eye protection. And it's just citing that there are issues with sort of the provider's own supply chains at the moment accessing PPE. I think this is different pockets of different sort of success rates, I suppose we say, in terms of procuring PPE at the moment. Yes, the answer is in terms of local authority, we are, in terms of our business resilience planning, we are ensuring that there's sufficient PPE stock for basically the masks, visors, goggles, gloves, whichever you need basically to ensure safety for the public at large. We are doing a basis of risk assessment, everything to make sure we've got sufficient stock, and stock intake is ongoing basis, and we're working with colleagues in health and Welsh Government to make sure we've got sufficient stock to do that. So usual route for coming through to access that stock. And I'll take this point just to get a bit of clarity, because I think there's confusion about what's happening. So colleagues in our team are ringing individual providers every day, whether it be residential, domiciliary or nursing. Part of that will be to do with basically current status with your staff, with sickness rates, symptomatic cases, and then we'll also do RAG rating in terms of your PPE stocks. The route in order to request PPE from us is email into the ASCSDT box. That is the principal point of contact that we use when assessing requirements. We will also use the RAG status, but that's more of a judgment in terms of volume, etc. But if you need PPE stock for clarity, email the team. Don't rely on the ring round data to do that. It's the email into the team, okay? As I say, we're scoping down in terms of the whole sector, and a lot of stock went out yesterday.
So the next question is, what about care for individuals with a learning disability or mental health issue under the age of 65, where not providing personal care but could be within 2 meters? Should PPE be worn for this? Not all care is for older adults. Yes, we are using it in our mental health settings and in our in all our settings. So I think yes, if you're within 2 meters of somebody, then yes, I would recommend you wear the mask and eye protection.
I'll pick up the next one. So it's talking about guidance with full PPE and the sort of allocations of PPE that's been ongoing previously. Large volume agency. I'd like to say is that we have had, along with other authorities and other private agencies, we're all trying to procure and secure PPE stock. I think there's been a lot of work done in the background with various teams within different agencies and procurement teams to ensure stock levels are coming through. I can say that is picking up now, and we're at a point where we've got much larger volumes coming in to do that. So I think I would also highlight the fact that the previous guidance we were using, where you may have had sort of more limited amounts of stock, at that stage the guidance was we were only issuing PPE or using enhanced PPE for symptomatic cases only. So as I said, the guidance has now changed last week in terms of all contact PPE for domiciliary settings, similarly for sessional in residential care. So within that new guidance we went out last week, we are increasing our sort of stock and procurement for PPE stock in line with that. Okay, so it may have been a problem in the past, it shouldn't be in the future.
So the next question is, for the goggles, is it satisfactory to wash hands with soap and water? Can a similar solution be used for cleansing of the goggles, as specialised solutions are very difficult to obtain for domiciliary care agencies? Yes, if soap and water is good enough for your hands, then and it's all that's available for the visors or goggles, then yes, I would be happy. So what you're doing is reducing the viral load, which will reduce the risk for you then with that equipment.
Next question is, do we need to change the mask after each individual giving personal care? So again, that comes down to the sort of sessional use question. So it depends whether you are moving from an area where there are multiple patients with the same with coronavirus, or whether you're staying within the same area. So if you're looking after the same type of patient and you're staying in the same area, that you can use the mask sessionally, so you can keep it on between patients and change everything below your neck. If you're moving from a patient who has illness to a patient who doesn't, then we're asking you to change your mask at that point. And obviously, if you're moving from household to household, we're going to ask you to change your mask in between.
So the next question is, go back to the cleaning solution for goggles and visors. Is it readily available for purchase? Chlorine products are, actually it's Milton. You'll see it under the usual name in the shops, but I'm sure there are other brands available also.
Okay. Just waiting for questions to come in now. If I can just touch on the sessional use again. I think we've obviously touched on it earlier, but I think for absolute clarity, what the expectation is from us. Where there are sort of settings, close settings where no symptomatic cases amongst service users are there, the expectation is that staff will be using the enhanced PPE with the visors and masks on a sessional basis. So that's a standard now across the board for basically any given care staff coming in on a shift. You'll be expected to wear the enhanced PPE on a sessional basis. If there are symptomatic cases, obviously that will increase to each individual care episode, I think we're calling it, isn't it? So you'll change your PPE in between calls between residents at that stage. But as a standard operating practice, now we're looking at residential setting, all staff to be wearing enhanced PPE at all times.
Until you go for your break.
Yeah, that doesn't mean taking it off and putting it back on again. So if anything's been removed, it needs to be replaced with a fresh mask. For example, if you've gone for your tea break or you've gone for your lunch, you don't put the same mask back on again, don't reuse the masks. I
was aware of a report last week from one of the homes where staff were coming out of providing care in an individual's room and hanging up masks or PPE equipment outside for reuse. So what?
No, so the masks you're provided with are all disposable, so they must be binned and cannot be put back on again. The visor, as I say, so long as it's wiped down after use, we don't mind it hanging up outside after, but it must be cleaned after being used and before it can be used again.
Okay. I think nothing coming in at the moment, so it's a good opportunity now to introduce Sarah from our remote and health department. If you want to just join us.
Yeah. Afternoon, everybody. I'm with the Environmental Health Department with the Communicable Disease Health and Safety team. So if any of your homes have had outbreaks of norovirus in the recent months, years, then undoubtedly you would have spoken to either myself or one of my team members. So I'm aware that a number of you are very well drilled in what to do cleaning-wise and decontamination-wise in the event of a norovirus situation. So I thought this was a good opportunity to just reinforce those messages of how to deal with cleaning and disinfection for coronavirus. And it's basically identical in how you deal with it. And I think there's some nice key things for you to take away and remember. It has come to our attention that some homes have been relying on the use of a general antibacterial spray for cleaning of communal areas where there have been symptomatic residents. Keep that in the kitchen, that's where it belongs. You need to be using a product which has a chlorine base to it, as Yvonne was describing earlier. So you're looking at something like Milton, Actichlor, sorry, anything similar to that. It's got to have a chlorine base to it. Bleach is the common one which everybody's familiar with, although I know that some homes are a little bit worried about using that. Now the key thing is that you know your product, so has it got a chlorine base? You need to be aware of what the manufacturer's instructions are for it. So for example, for Actichlor, you've got tablets which may be of different sizes and weights. So that is going to have an impact on what your dilution is. That's the next key thing, is when you know you've got the correct product, you need to make sure that you're diluting it correctly. Now, as Yvonne's already touched on earlier, you need 1,000 parts per million. You need to check on the label for that particular product what you need to do to dilute it to 1,000 parts per million. So for some Actichlor products, it's 1 tablet in a litre, but that will depend on the size of the tablet. So that's why it's so important with every new batch of product you buy that you double check that label to make sure that you are using the correct dosage and the correct dilution. Once you've got your dilution right, you then need to double check what the contact time is going to be. So there's a wide range of products out there and they've all got different contact times. Some are 4 minutes, some are 5 minutes, sometimes Milton may actually be 20 minutes. So you definitely need to make sure that you're applying that product for the required contact time. Otherwise, it's not going to be effective. And I think the other key message is you need to make your product fresh on a daily basis. If you make up a spray bottle of your cleaning product and it's sat on a windowsill, the UV will actually start to degrade the effectiveness of it. And the number of days that go by, it deteriorates in its effectiveness. So if you make a fresh batch up every day, you know it's going to work to its full effectiveness. So I think if you take those key messages away and keep those in mind when you're cleaning with regards to control of coronavirus, you ensure your product, you ensure you're achieving the correct dilution, and then you're following the correct contact time for that dilution. That's all you need to do. And I think if you just mirror what you do in a norovirus situation, then you're going to be on top of the cleaning and disinfection. One little thing just to remember, I know that some homes are using wipes. Canal is one that's a medically graded wipe, which is often used in care settings. It's very easy for people to leave the lid off and they just dry out. So as soon as they dry out, they become ineffective. So if you prefer wipes, it's very critical that you make sure that they do remain moist so that they work.
Right, so the next question is, do we have to use the same mask for each time while we enter into the symptomatic patient's room in a care setting? So you would put on a clean mask each time you go in the room. That mask needs to be disposed of when you come out of the room.
Okay, the next question, are we saying that in supported living, if someone is sat with someone supported, watching TV or undertaking an activity with someone supported who is not symptomatic, within less than 2 meters between them, for example in a lounge, dining room, etc., that they should be wearing full PPE? That is not our understanding of table 4. So, I mean, I guess you guys might have comments as well, but I would say that if it's possible to socially distance yourself sufficiently that you don't need PPE, then that would seem the most obvious solution. So in the situation where you're watching TV, if the room is large enough to socially distance yourself, then I would say that PPE is not required, and that would be my preferred option. If that's not possible, then obviously it falls within the guidance that you're within 2 meters of a patient or a client, and therefore PPE could be required. And if flipping it round, you were asking me you wanted to wear PPE in that session, I think we would support you. Is that broadly what you think as well?
Yeah.
I think it all goes down to the basic risk assessment you're undertaking for sort of the size of service you're undertaking. Obviously, we're looking to avoid any unnecessary sort of usage of PPE as it is, but if it's relevant, the risk assessment defines that you require PPE in that scenario. Obviously, we will reflect that in terms of the provision and the stock of PPE we're bringing in. So I think if you've got a test case, you're not sure, this is the whole reason of having these webinars, really, to talk through some of these scenarios, which may not be quite clear through the guidance that's going out. Again, ASCSDT, put it through to us in terms of a question that we'll get a definitive formal line from you for that.
And like everything else, these are guidelines designed to help really in you delivering care, not to be really prescriptive about what you should do in each setting. So in some ways, I would say that if you've risk assessed the situation, we will support what decision you want to make. If you think that that is not a significant infection risk and you're comfortable not wearing the PPE, we would support you in that, and conversely the other way around. So I don't think it's for the guidance to be prescriptive about every situation.
Final question, so are ammonium disinfectants not appropriate? What you need to do is just make sure that the product is capable of being effective against enveloped viruses. So if it doesn't say that on the actual label, then get in touch with the supplier, get a product data sheet for it, and that should clarify what it is actually effective against. And again, just follow the correct dilution and contact time for that product.
Yeah, so the canal wipes are an ammonium, or they have a quat-based disinfectant, and they are suitable for equipment and environment.
Someone just making a comment that a good place to buy cleaning and disinfecting products is Solutions Express, Unit C5, West Point Industrial Estate, Penarth. CF11HJQ, they've been helpful and advised over the last 5-6 weeks and have products in stock which are effective. Can we incorporate Milton solution in the community home care? Is the next question.
I'm not quite sure that I understand that. I mean, if Milton is available and you've got some cleaning to do, then I'm happy for it to be used.
Okay, at that point, I think there's so many questions coming. We'll take a 5-minute break now. We're joined now, so it's chat time. Just going past 20 to 4, so we'll take a quick 5-minute break now. Obviously, time has changed slightly in terms of the technical issues we've had earlier, so we'll have another quick quarter-hour Q&A session after a 5-minute break now, if that's okay. So we'll catch back up at 10 to, and then have another quick quarter-hour then. Thanks, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for letting us have a quick break. We'll do another quick quarter-hour session of Q&A for you. So just to kick off, question come back whether we can refuse to admit the patient after the hospital admission for the safety and well-being of other residents. I mean, we would hope that basically you're supportive within that the hospital teams are doing as much as they can in terms of risk assessing patients before they're discharged from hospital. We will be supporting you in terms of where people are readmitted. You have effective amounts of PPE, you've had the training and support to do that. So there will be the support and confidence within your staff teams to enable that discharge to take place. So if it's one of your residents who's gone in, been admitted and is coming back, we would hope that you would facilitate that readmission back into the home, really. And we will sort of put whatever support needed and equipment needed to make that happen.
Just to make the point in terms of risk, actually at the point where the patients are being discharged from hospital, their risk is an absolute fraction of what it was at the point where they developed symptoms. So actually your principal risk to the other residents is at the point where the person becomes unwell and requires the hospital admission. So by the time they come to their 14 days post-symptom onset, and I think we can get very hung up on whether we get them out of hospital too quickly or how long they remain in hospital. All of the risk is concentrated around the time when the patient becomes symptomatic, and very little of the risk is in taking these patients back after they've had a hospital admission.
Would you be able to do just that sort of timeline in terms of where exposure to sort of non-contagious, reducing symptoms to the isolation periods?
Yeah, sure. So bearing in mind this is a completely new disease and we've been learning about it since January, the evidence so far suggests that the vast majority of transmission happens at the point the person becomes symptomatic, and possibly for a small period of time beforehand as well, which wasn't appreciated early on. So there probably is some asymptomatic transmission, as we call it, or transmission at the point where the patient has very few symptoms. And that's why we changed the PPE policy really to anyone providing close personal care wearing PPE to try and prevent transmission just before the patient becomes unwell. And then following that, the sort of pragmatic guidance is that 7 days following the onset of symptoms, you're deemed non-infectious. And obviously within that, there's a spectrum, and your infectivity to other people will gradually decline. And some people might be non-infectious much sooner. A small percentage of people might be infectious for longer, and those are the people probably who end up going into hospital, particularly the ones who end up going to intensive care. So people with very severe disease might shed virus for longer, might be deemed infectious for longer, and that's why for those patients we recommend 14 days. And in fact, for all hospitalised patients going into your care home setting, 14 days is the duration for which we say they remain infectious. But as I said, that's a number designed to be on the sort of ultra cautious side, and really, in my view, in a lot of the infectious diseases community, the risk is very much front loaded at the point where the patient first develops symptoms. Does that help?
Very much, thank you. So questions come in terms of supported living environment where clients with learning disabilities share a house. Do support staff need to wear enhanced PPE for the whole 8-hour shift, even when they are not providing personal care at all times? So it is that sort of sessional support aspect in terms of what's going on. I suppose the analogy would be that if there's not direct support taking place and they're in the breakout area or sort of lounge area where they're not working with residents, they have to put on new PPE kit when they started working, I'm assuming at that stage.
So I guess you're balancing there trying to ration PPE a little bit to use it so that we're not burning through stock, with trying to make your working practice comfortable and not wearing PPE when you don't need to. So everything's a sort of balance of risks and benefits in that regard. Yeah. So if you're going in and out of a situation where you will be within 2 meters and providing close contact, it makes sense to continue wearing the PPE, obviously taking it off for breaks and things like that. But if you're going to be out of a environment where you're providing close personal care for quite some time, it makes sense to take it off and restart. As with all these things, it's a real balance, isn't it?
Yeah, and it wouldn't be that comfortable to wear for all that time if it's not required. So you risk then, you know, if it's itching your nose or uncomfortable, you risk putting your hands up to your face, which would, you know, you really don't want. So if it's, if you're not up close and personal all the time, then it's not really required.
Yeah.
If they had to go outside of the building, fire break or something like that, or, you know,
Take it
collection.
Yeah.
off. Take it off. Yeah, you wouldn't really want them outside the building. You wouldn't, they wouldn't be able to
But then
smoke
when
bag
you go
in.
back-
You can't get the cigarettes.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. But when they come back in the building then?
Well, I suppose depending on what they're doing, if they're going to be in the room with people, you know, within 2 meters quite a lot of the time, then yeah, they can come back on.
Okay, well, I'll do a bit of a closing bit for now. We'll give a couple more minutes for questions. Just to say that the footage here will be available via the link. Maybe 7 days, but I'm told it may actually extend past that time frame. But you can go back at any time on the link. The whole video session will be there available for you to use. The objective with this is very much that this information cascades down to the individual staff who are out there doing the calls and domiciliary, and your care workers actually delivering the care. So I understand obviously that this has been received by a lot of management coordinator level, but the objective really is this cascades out to the staff, so it reassures them in terms of their practice and they feel fully equipped for providing care, you know, even with COVID cases. So just let you know, so that's there available online. We will look to put this on YouTube as soon as possible as well, and we'll let you know via email as and when that's done.
If a patient is discharged after a confirmed COVID-19 diagnosis, how long do you recommend full visor for? So currently we're discharging patients from hospital once they're non-infectious. So from the point of view of that patient, you don't require PPE, but obviously you're wearing PPE anyway for the other residents of your care home. So actually, if you were, let's imagine a situation where your entire care home is made up of people who've had COVID-19 and discharged from hospital, you wouldn't require PPE. But in the situations it's more likely where a patient is coming out of hospital into a general care home setting, they specifically don't pose an infection risk, but you'd be wearing the PPE anyway for your other residents.
Just in terms of ongoing questions following the webinar today, if I can just check colleagues here, if we get subsequent questions, are you happy for direct approaches via email?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so is that okay with you as well, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what we'll do with the link to this webinar, we'll put out the contact details for Yvonne, Owen and Sarah here. So if you have questions after, obviously go direct to them. But you're more than happy if you want to pass them through the ASCSDT link, we'll obviously forward that on to the guys as needs be. Okay, but yeah, more than happy with that.
Can I just mention one thing? One of the ongoing, I suppose, problems with COVID is a lot of people have a lingering cough, like a lingering tickly cough. You know, if they are in their own room and you wouldn't normally wear a mask for somebody who's coughing, the chances of them transmitting COVID is very low. But if they do have a persistent cough and you are up close and personal, then our normal infection control advice would kick in. So you would wear a mask if there is a risk of them coughing in your face, not necessarily from COVID, but from other organisms that they might carry on the back of their throats. And that. But you know, just because somebody has a lingering cough after COVID, it doesn't mean that they are still infectious with COVID.
I think the next question relates to whether people can be admitted purely on the basis of not being able to isolate in their own home. So if any of our residents become positive, can we send that patient to the hospital, as we don't have any specific rooms for isolation, and it would be very difficult to manage them in their room for isolating. I guess being unable to isolate at home is one of the criteria for admission to the hospital, but obviously we'd look to explore any other options really for isolating before it got to that point, because admission to hospital is bad for many other reasons. So yes, it's possible, and we have admitted people purely from the point of view of them being unable to isolate at home, but it's not ideal, and we'd want to explore other options first if possible.
There's also a scenario where local authority has booked beds across the city for intermediate care or emergency respite, this type scenario. So maybe the situation we're able to help with transfer of accommodation at that point, but just engage with us, ASCSDT, or through your social worker direct with the risk assessment you've done. and we'll see if we can support in that scenario as well. So there are options in terms of what can happen in that case.
What do staff do when they're out in the community, for example, exercising with clients who are not symptomatic? Should they wear full PPE?
Really see the clients wanting to exercise if they're symptomatic, but
I think they say asymptomatic there. So if you've got asymptomatic patients who are exercising, I think it's probably impractical to wear PPE in that setting, and the risk is going to be dramatically reduced by being outside in, in a well-ventilated external environment. So I would try to maintain some element of social distancing if you can, keeping a reasonable distance between yourself and the client. But I don't think wearing full PPE is going to be appropriate in that setting.
And again, we need to encourage good cough etiquette. So, have tissues available if people are coughing, etc. And, make sure they bin them after use where they can.
Okay, that seems to be on. So no more questions coming in. We'll draw this to a close for today. Just to say, we're hoping to put on other webinars in future. There'll also be one set up next week. I think we've got an officer from Public Health Wales will be coming in, and maybe Yvonne as well at that stage. We'll act nicely. But yeah, so there'll be more of these in future. If there are any sort of themes you want us to pick up in terms of training practice or guidance, let us know through ASCSDT. Obviously, if it's specific practice questions, obviously Yvonne within the Sarah Centre come through them direct, and we'll tag on the emails to the link for you for that. So I suppose just at this point saying thanks very, very much for coming in today. It's been extremely helpful, and hope it's been a benefit to everybody out there as well.